original article. Stephan's talk in Boulder, the Boulder ISF in 2018, which was called Forecasting the Future of Retail Forecasting, brought in the largest audience we've ever had in a practitioner track. And now, just in case he left out anything in that talk, he's here today to talk about everything, to tell us everything you ever wanted to know about retail forecasting and more. Stephan.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for attending this talk here. Thank you, everybody online. I just read that people can actually hear us now, so which should be fine. So I'm going to talk about forecasting in retail. Thank you, everybody, for being here and attending this talk, as I said. This works. Oh, this is wonderful. All right, so I'm going to talk about retail. I'll have a main focus on ordinary, boring brick and mortar retail, but much of what I'm going to talk about is also applicable to omnichannel, online, what have you. Why does a retailer need forecasts? And what I'm going to show here is not an SAP customer, I'm glad to say. So I'm slightly affiliated with the Lancaster University Management School as an honorary researcher. That means I need to work for them and not get paid for it. And last time I was in Lancaster, actually, the time before that, I'm getting first pushback here. Very good. Actually, not the last time, but the time before that, I went to Lancaster. I went to the main square, and there was a convenience store there. And well, I walked inside because part of my job, which I like very much, is going anywhere in the world. I walk through the supermarkets and look at things because that's my job. I can actually go shopping as a man, right? So in supermarkets, and I took pictures. And you might notice some things are not the way they should be. Like up here we have a promotion on heritage-free eggs, free-range eggs, 1 pound for a carton of 6. Unfortunately, there are none left. So some people might have been rather unhappy about that. More empty shelves up here. You could buy any 2 bags of grated cheese for 3 pounds. Unfortunately, there is only 1 or 2 bags left, and so on and so forth, empty shelves wherever you looked. So that was kind of interesting, and people probably didn't like it. So I'm not going to say that it's all due to bad forecasting, but if you get bad forecasts, you get empty shelves. All right, so 1 year later, I'm back in Lancaster. Those are the good old times when you could actually travel. I went back to the store and wanted to see whether things had changed. The store was boarded up, it was closed, it was shut down. I went online and I saw that the entire chain had folded, all of it. This was my local, some of the British people here may know it, was a chain of convenience stores. The slogan was fresh, friendly, convenient, and now out of business. When I went online, I took a look at social message boards and what have you, and people were incensed at this chain, and you saw why it went out of business. I particularly like the one down here, no daily mirrors. They didn't have daily mirrors, which in England is probably the worst thing that can happen to a retailer. For goodness sake, how difficult is it to order Britain's most popular newspaper? My dog would make a better job at being manager, all with the orthographic errors down here. So you actually see that this customer was not happy. So this is why a retailer needs forecasts. And yeah, to be a little more serious now, there's tons of different planning steps, planning processes that rely on forecasting. A retailer is, of course, only one example, and we have tons of other examples where you need plans. And plans need to be forward-looking. So forward-looking is just another word for forecasting. Starting at the top, as a retailer, you have to figure out where do you want to open new stores, or nowadays more commonly close old ones. Do you want to add new product lines or not? Do you want to diversify into some assortment that you didn't have before? Other strategic decisions, do you want to have everyday low price versus promotional strategy? That's a major decision for a retailer, and they'll at least have to figure out what's going to happen if I switch my strategy so radically. Then you have the tactical level where you have assortment planning. Assortment planning is essentially if you have a fashion retailer and you need to figure out what am I going to put onto my shelves, into my display cases for the next winter season. I have a huge catalog of things I could order from China. Which of these do I put into on my shelves? Then once you've done your assortment planning, you've ordered your stuff from China, it arrives in the port, nowadays or not. You have a couple of containers full of product. How do I push them into the store? How many do I put into each store, into each distribution center? That is allocation planning. And then you have your products, and then at some point in time, you need to optimize your prices so that, for instance, as a fashion retailer, you end up at the end of the season, ideally with no product left over, because everything left over, you need to kind of get rid of. And if you run out of product before the season ends, well, you probably left money lying on the table and people are unhappy. You have promotion planning, you have supply negotiations, logistics, and then you have operational planning, and that's what I think I know most about is store replenishment and distribution center replenishment. So you have a particular store, you have a particular product, and you need to know how much of this product do I need to order today, so it's going to arrive tomorrow, be put on the shelves, and last until the next order arrives. And do this for each of your several thousand stores and several tens of thousands stock-keeping units. And we're going to look at some examples on why this is so hard to do, really. All right, so we'll talk a little about the characteristics of retail demand, about the dimensions of the challenge. I'll go into catastrophes, and I'll have on the menu, we have earthquakes, pandemics, wars, and social media. Then actually I'm going probably to skip the M5 forecasting competition because we've been talking about that at great length, but I can give you my thoughts on the M5 too. I'll give a few examples and come to conclusions. So, characteristics of retail demand. So this is one of these products that a retailer is confronted with. Actually, it's a rather boring product, and that's what makes it so nice as a showcase. This is something everybody knows. This is tomatoes. So you need to forecast tomatoes. So you see that this time series is actually rather ancient. I should update this at some point in time, but honestly, I think that the demand for tomatoes hasn't changed since 2008. So I'm fine with still using that. Each data point is one daily sale in one supermarket, or not one daily sale, one total of daily sales in kilograms. And the first thing to notice is that this store actually sells 600 or 800 kilograms of tomatoes in a single day. And just think of 800 kilograms of tomatoes. That's a lot of tomato salad. And this is only one stock keeping unit. So my homework for you is next time you go shopping, you go through the produce aisle and you count the different stock keeping units that are tomatoes. Because you have the open tomatoes that you weigh yourselves, you have the pre-packaged tomatoes in bags of 1 pound or what have you. You have the cherry tomatoes, you have them in red, in yellow, in green, in blue, in mixed colors. You have all of these from the Netherlands and from elsewhere. I'll refrain from the obvious joke. You have all of these crossed by conventional versus organic. So you can have up to 10 or 12 different stock keeping units, and all of them are tomatoes, and you have to replenish each and every one of them separately. So it's rather a big problem, really, that you end up with. The first thing that we see in this time series is really, or the second thing, we already saw the amount as the first thing. The second thing is that we see a little seasonality happening here. So you have higher sales. I think this pointer isn't really very helpful, so I'll just haggle around, do something rather helplessly here. We see that we have higher sales in early to mid-summer, roughly. That's when people probably do their tomato salad. And that, of course, differs by region. I mean, the most obvious difference would be you'd have different patterns in Europe than in Australia. I was in Australia once, and we had a discussion about whether about Christmas sale being dependent on whether you had a barbecue weather around Christmas. That was rather strange for me to think about, having barbecues around Christmas. But of course, you'll also have differences between different countries in Europe. You'll also have different stores that work differently, and so on and so forth. So we have seasonality here, yearly seasonality, year-over-year seasonality. The next thing that we see is, if we take every single daily cumulative sale here, every single plot, and just plot them against day of week, rather than as a time series. Store was closed on Sunday, so no data points here. We'll see lots of data points over Monday through Saturday. And what we see is a very typical retail pattern here. There's this fishhook or hockey stick pattern with higher sales on Friday and on Saturday. And again, there are stores that have higher sales on Friday than on Saturday, and others have a pattern like this, higher sales on Saturday and then on Friday. I'm actually going to also talk about the dispersion that it changes over the week here. So you need to keep this intra-weekly seasonality in mind too, and that's most important for perishables. If you have canned soup, then it doesn't really matter whether you sell it on Monday or on Saturday. If you have tomatoes and you put in too many tomatoes on Monday, then you'll only be able to sell them on Saturday, and by which time they'll not look as good anymore. So you actually need to keep this in mind when you do your forecasting. And it gets worse when you come up to Saturday and Sunday, because Sunday the store is closed and your tomatoes just deteriorate while nobody's buying them. So keep this additional intra-weekly seasonal pattern in mind. So you have multiple seasonalities that overlay each other, yearly seasonality and weekly seasonality. Here's a fun little time series. That's actually not retail demand. Those are questions and answers at Cross-Validated. That's a statistics Q&A site where they just did a little analysis of when do questions pop up. That's average number of questions per hour. And each line is a separate day of the week. So we have Monday through Friday happening up here, and Saturday and Sunday down there. And like most, this turquoise line, that's Friday, that starts out like a day of the week, and then at the end, it turns into the weekend. At some point in time, people stop asking questions about statistics because they actually want to have a weekend. All right, so a couple of other examples where you have these multiple seasonalities. So in retail, more day of week and yearly seasonality, cross-validated, more hour of day versus the day of week. Other examples are, well, everything that's perishable. So we have the tomatoes, we have the strawberries, meat, everything on the meat counter. A bakery is a very typical news vendor item. You typically can't sell, at least many bakery products you can't sell in the next year or only at a deep discount. And actually that makes life much easier because you don't have to worry about inventories. You always start the day with zero inventory. That's actually easier than many other things. All right, other seasonalities, like paycheck effects. We have that, but they're really far weaker. So stuff like whenever people get their paychecks, they spend more money or they spend it on other things, on staples, for instance. You see that, but it's far weaker and hard to see on a specific product level. All right, so if we add this intra-weekly seasonality to our model, then we get something that starts looking more and more sophisticated, so you can already impress your customers with this here, and we have the forecast going down there. So you see how we have the intra-yearly and the intra-weekly seasonality on top of each other. And then, of course, we have price changes, and that's the price time series that I was given for this product here. That's prices per kilograms. And you see how price reductions correspond to sales peaks to a degree. And so you have this main driver. If prices go down, sales go up. Econ 101, people understand that. If Britain leaves the European Union and European students have to pay full tuition, full international tuition, European students leave British universities. Very surprising effect. Okay, so if we include this price effect in our forecast, then things become even more sophisticated with higher sales expected for weeks with lower prices here. And to be honest, I don't really know whether I trust this price time series because it wiggles around too much. You don't really see your tomato prices wiggling around so much. They typically have a standard price, they have price reductions, they go back to the standard price, and at some point in time with inflation, price goes up. Price doesn't really wiggle around so much like it does here. So I don't really trust this price time series so much, but the data problems are something that would come in later on because there's many data problems here. So we have causal factors. Now we had a nice little discussion yesterday in our workshop about causality and drivers and correlations. And honestly, I'm taking the naive approach here and I'm saying that promotions are causal. If you have a promotion, then that causes higher sales. That's at least my point of view, even without a real serious analysis. And we have tons of promotions, and that's actually one of my pain points. The retailers are extremely good at dreaming up promotions far faster than we can model them in our code, because they have people who are paid for dreaming up new promotion types. And you see stuff like standard TPR, that's temporary price reductions. You just reduce the price on a product temporarily for everybody. That's simple, that's straightforward. Everybody gets a lower price. You have BOGO, buy one, get one. You buy one unit of a product, you get a second one for free. You also get stuff like this here, that you can't see, the one that where my pointer should be. You buy N of X at X% off, so to get M of a product Y, a different product, at Y% off. That is not a typo. That's my personal abbreviation. We're not using that at SAP. And I hope nobody's taking any inspiration away from this here, because honestly, I wouldn't know how to deal with stuff like that. But that's the way these people think. So buy 2 cases of this here, present the coupon at the cash register, do an interpretive dance, you get a plush teddy, something like that. You get conditions like a coupon. You can only take advantage of a promotion if you carry the coupon on your mobile phone, in the newspaper, what have you. Perhaps the promotion is you don't have a reduced price, but if you buy this product, then you get some kind of reward. You get additional loyalty points. You get additional airline miles, especially in the US. If you buy a printer, you may get cash backs. Do we have that here? Actually, don't have that here. You get cash back. You buy the product, you fill in a coupon, you mail it in, you get cash back like 2 months later. It's another kind of promotion. Then you have lots of tactics. What's a tactic? A tactic is, how do I communicate the promotion to the customer? So I may have a temporary price reduction, and maybe that's communicated by having a shelf tag, little tag on the shelf. Maybe it's communicated in the flyer, in the app, as a push message in the app. Maybe it's only communicated to a certain subsection of your app users, only those that actually use this product, or only those that you want to steer towards this product. And other people have to rely on the shelf tag. Of course, depending on how you communicate this, what kind of tactics you use, you may have very differential sales uplifts, and you need to account for those in your forecasting. Then you have suppression effects on regular sales. So picture the situation, you have a promotion, but you can only take advantage of that if you have the coupon on your app. So people who do not have the app or do not have the coupon, they'll still buy the product on regular sales. But you'll have lower regular sales because those people that can take advantage of the promotion may switch to the promotion. And you may still need to forecast regular sales and promotional sales separately, because your retailer wants to keep his finances straight and his ducks in a row. You have calendar events like Christmas, Chinese New Year, day of month effects. We talked about those paycheck effects. You have holidays where perhaps the store is closed and demand shifts around, especially in Germany, for instance. You have many holidays that fall on a Thursday. You can imagine what happens to Friday and Saturday's demand and what happens to me right after that, because your forecast is never good enough. You have other things. I like to call it other stuff. Weather. Everybody wants us to include the weather, and the problem with weather is it's rather obvious to see the weather effect on aggregate data. If you have weather like this outside, you'll have higher sales on water. It's just much harder to disentangle this effect on a very fine-grained granular level, on the stock-keeping unit level, to really make sure that more product is pushed into each store. And even then, if the heat wave is bad enough, then at some point in time you have supply problems, but we're going to come into that later on. We have cannibalization and complementarity. I gave a little talk, I don't know, many years ago here at the ISF about cannibalization on bananas. I had a wonderful picture of one banana eating the other one. What was the takeaway from that? I looked at organic bananas and conventional bananas. If you had a promotion on organic bananas and prices on organic bananas went down, of course, sales for organic bananas went up, no surprise there. But sales for conventional bananas went down because people switched from conventional to organic. Conversely, when you had a promotion on conventional bananas, sales for conventional bananas went up, but sales for organic bananas stayed the same, because people who buy organic will not switch to conventional bananas just because the price goes down. If they were price sensitive, they would be buying conventional in the first place. So cannibalizations are asymmetric. It's not the case that you can just say it's a symmetric relationship. And top right here, or top middle here, there's one time series in our older UI where you see the time series up here. So these are sales, rather intermittent. And down here, these colored dots, this plethora of colors, that's a promotion. So you see, it's essentially you have more different promotions than sales acts that are happening here. So very often the effect of a promotion is far from obvious. Often it is obvious and often it is not obvious, and we need to disentangle the two. Great. Here's an example just of such a time series, and That is, again, daily sales up there. I took the y-axis out to protect the innocent, and we have all these different promotional markers down here. We have the promotional prices, and I'm only putting prices in here when they differ from the regular price. So every blue dot here is a price change, a price reduction. We have multiple different tactics. I don't know how many of these are shelf tags or secondary placements or app information or what have you. And then finally down here we have a Boolean marker whether there's a discount. So sometimes you may have a discount and the price still stays up. I don't know how much happens here. And what I am seeing up here is the absolute humongous effect of some promotions. So some promotions, yeah, they happen and sales go up a little. And some promotions happen and sales just explode through the roof. And those may or may not correspond to the steep price reductions. Over here, we had a huge sales spike, while the price reduction was really nothing to write home about. So, and we don't know whether that means that there was a data error or whether that just means that we had a huge variability in the effect of promotions. So we're going to come to variability later on too. And you need to disentangle all of those. And that happens for, yeah, we're going to come to the dimensions of the problem. Calendar effects. This is aggregate sales for one store. And we have 3 different calendar events, which we put in here as colored bars. Black is the sales and yellow is our forecast. And now I'm going to wake you all up and ask you, there are 3 different calendar events. And this is where the year starts. And I'm interested in this green bar. You see that we have a green bar with huge sales in the run-up to this calendar event. Over here too. Does anybody venture a guess what calendar event this green bar is? Yes, please. Yeah, wonderful. You've seen the talk before, right? Yeah, okay. No, okay. No, it's right. It's Chinese New Year. This one, the blue one, that's Christmas, and we see that Christmas doesn't really have an impact here. And the green one, that's actually varying a little according to Western calendar. That's Chinese New Year. Actually, that's an example that I got from Hong Kong. I had 4 stores of a high-end jeweler drugstore, and 3 of them had a huge Christmas effect and a much lower Chinese New Year effect, and 1 store had a huge Chinese New Year effect and a much lower Christmas effect. And they also had differentials in the day of week pattern. So the stores with a high Christmas effect had higher sales on Saturday, and this store had higher sales on Sunday. So you could actually see the demographics in the aggregate sales of the store. So a very interesting thing. All right, so we've seen that before. This is not a test, this is not an error. We've had the this exact slide before, but this time I'd like to draw your attention to the point of the heteroscedasticity that we have in here. So it's not only that aggregate sale or the median sales here, this little line here, go up over the week. It's also that the variability increases hugely. You have much lower variability Monday through Thursday, and then it picks up on Friday and Saturday. And you need to keep that in mind when you calculate your safety stocks, because either you need more safety stock on Saturday to reach the same target service level, or you may think in terms of, well, perhaps these are strawberries, perhaps this is really stuff news vendor product, everything, or perhaps not news vendor stuff because that's easier. Perhaps this is something that has like a shelf life of 2 days. So not the absolute ultra fresh produce, but something that you can sell the next day too. On Saturday, you may be thinking, if I put in enough product for a 95% service level, everything I'm not selling, I will need to keep over Sunday until Monday, but on Monday I have to throw it away. During the rest of the week, I can sell everything that I'm not selling today on the next day. On Saturday, I'm stuck with a closed Sunday. So maybe on Saturday, I'll live with a lower service target. And if people come in at 4 in the afternoon, they'll need to understand that I don't have anything left and that I have to use a substitute product. Is there a problem? Is there a question? No, no. Question?
Given how important it is, how would you figure out when it is so heteroscedastic that
All right, so I'll repeat the question for the benefit of our people online. The question is, when would I know whether the heteroscedasticity was so bad that I needed to switch replenishment policies from simpler ones to more complicated ones? I would say, well, we just start out with more complicated ones. We always use a target service level, a target quantile forecast essentially, and fill up to a 95% quantile aggregate quantile forecast, and do that across the line, and yeah, then worry about logistical units later on. So that makes it easier. We don't need to switch anywhere. We start out with a more complicated start. So what we need, just drop the term, is quantile forecast still our tomatoes that we've seen a lot of so far. This is only the forecasting period, so I cut off everything before that. We see the actual sales, those are the gray dots down here. We see an expectation forecast, that's the red line down here, and then we see 3 different quantile forecasts. And if you look closely, then you'll see that the safety amount, so the difference between the expectation and the quantile, gets larger on Saturday. So this is just a constant quantile. So this is an illustration for what happens here, and you actually see the impact of, where is it? The price changes down here, price goes down, forecast goes up, and variances, predicted variances go up too, so the safety amount increases as well. So what do we see here? We see that the variance is not only differential between days of week, it's also differential between promotions. If you have a promotion, typically you not only have higher sales, average sales or expected sales, you also have higher variances, because sometimes people take advantage of the promotion and load up on whatever you have, and sometimes they just don't. So, and that is actually a problem for the retailer, because promotions are something important. Promotions are how you communicate with your customers, and promotions is how you pull people in. Remember that promotion on eggs in that defunct My Local, 6 eggs for £1. They advertised that, people came in, wanted to buy eggs, didn't find any, well, left dissatisfied. So you don't want to have too little product on the shelf for a promotion, but if you have too much product on the shelf after the promotion, you're stuck with product left over. And if it's eggs, you have to throw them away. And if it's durable goods, anything with a longer shelf life, it clogs up your back room. And clogged up back rooms are not good for a retailer, because they get confused, and your processes in the store get bogged down by all the product. So the question really is, as with the strawberries on Saturday, during a promotion, do I want to aim for the same service level as outside promotions? Do I want to aim for a higher service level and live with more product left over? Do I want to aim for a lower service level and deal with people being irate because they don't get what they came in to buy? So there you see how the forecast and the subsequent processes are kind of tied together. The question that we pose to the forecast depends on what we do with the forecast later on. Another little example of what happens in time series is short time series, and those are the more blatant examples, but typically a retailer will switch out, rule of thumb, 30% of their assortment. If you're a fashion retailer, you switch out everything. If you're a grocery, you switch out somewhat less than that. But you have a huge number of new product introductions, and that means you have a huge number of short time series. The milk and the tomatoes, yes, those have been selling for many years, no problem there, but everything that comes in new, you need to figure out, what am I going to do with this new product? You can do things like reference products. If you have a new product that's just a successor to an existing product, you can do 2 things. You can just tie together the time series and just use the old time series from the predecessor product, and then kind of add the new time series after that one, or you can fit a model to the old product and use that model as a prior for the new product. That's actually a straight up Bayesian approach. Yes, Anna. All right, again, I'll repeat it, whether we count changing packaging sizes as a new product. That's a very, yeah, I think, honestly, I don't know how our customers do it. We could do either one. We could just keep the same SKU number. I mean, all SKUs are just identified by a number. What that is, I don't know, I usually don't care. If they keep the same SKU number and just reduce the packaging size, because nobody increases the packaging size, that's fine. If they introduce a new packaging and a new size and put in a new SKU number, then that will be such a predecessor-successor relationship. It really depends on how they deal with their data. What happens often is that you'll have a bottle of Coke, like the 0.33 liter bottle of Coke, and sometimes they have promotional whatever campaigns where you have a little marker or sticker on the bottle of Coke. They can pull off and type in a code online and do whatever. And often those are tagged with different SKU numbers. And if the customer then forgets to tie the SKUs together, we suddenly have something that looks like a new product, although it's just the same bottle of Coke, just with a promotional marker on it. And much confusion results.
I have seen oven separate planning. Others try to bake it into the actual demand. What would you?
It depends very much on what you're doing. If it's really a successor product with a new iPhone, I would start out with a new product here, because I think, you're not pushing the old iPhone anymore. You're selling off what you have, but you're promoting the new iPhone. So, yeah, honestly, I see it both ways. Both ways can work. And sometimes you have both products on the same hanger in the store. It's just that they put the new ones on the hanger where the old one was. It really depends. It can do either way. It can just model on an aggregate level and then kind of split it out and have like an overlap period where you divide it up between the two products and stuff. You can do all kinds of things here. I would say it depends on what you really want to do and what the product is. Right? Okay, you already talked about life cycles, which is, in my opinion, kind of a different thing. Life cycle products are the products that have like a determined start and end of the life. And fashion is a prime example, and consumer electronics are the other example. In fashion, you have products, you sell them for whatever long your fashion cycle is. Could be 4 weeks, could be 3 months. And after that, a new life cycle, a new season starts. So you need work, and you have, I have a couple of examples here. Those are daily sales aggregated across a couple of different stores of one style, and that's in fashion forecasting. The next complication in fashion forecasting is that you have a style, which is like an embarrassing t-shirt, but you have that in different sizes and in different colors. You know, and you typically in fashion forecasting, you don't forecast on a stock keeping level, that is a style, a color, and a size. You forecast on the style level and then break it down using size curves and color curves. And so these are sales over for a style in across multiple stores, so different styles here. And you see, these are typical life cycle patterns here. You have strong sales at the beginning, and then they taper off, and then at the end you have these kind of lost little dots here where you sell off your remaining product. And those are actually the well-behaved products, because sometimes you see a life cycle, a product that sells, has its life cycle and then sells for 2 years in singletons later on. So you need to figure out when does the actual life cycle end, so I don't keep on this long tail of very low sales that may bias my forecast in some way. You typically don't repeat products, but one customer of mine, I had products that had multiple life cycles in the data, and they looked very different. And I asked him, look, are you selling the same shirt in this year and 2 years later and another year later on? And they looked at it and no, we just reuse the SKU numbers. I said, wonderful, thank you very much, that's extremely helpful. Typically, you know when they start selling, you may not know when they end, or you may have a constraint. We will not sell it past this time, or we'll just pull all the product from the stores or from the DC and push them off somewhere else. At the end, you may have markdowns when you start selling product at reduced prices just to get your inventory away, and sometimes you see very interesting patterns when something doesn't sell at all, then you have a markdown, suddenly it spikes. Like whatever, and the question for the forecaster really is what to do with markdowns, because we really don't want to go into markdowns. No retailer wants to mark down his product, he'd rather sell it at full price. So do we want to reduce the markdowns? Do we take them out of the learning data, the history, or do we keep it in, because at some point in time we do need to forecast markdowns in terms of, do I mark this down 20%, 30, 50%? How do I get my product out? So there's different forecasting exercises in there. We also have what's similar but different, seasonal products. This is a seasonal product here that had kind of a life cycle where it sells during part of the year. And then sometimes it sells in between, and those are probably data errors of all interesting varieties, those are like strawberries and stuff like that. It's only sold part of the year, and then it's not at all. And what do you forecast here? Well, you want to forecast something during the life cycle. Usually nobody will tell you from when till when the life cycle happens in the future, or they may not even know because they don't know when strawberries become available at the wholesaler. So you need to forecast the beginning of the life cycle essentially and the end, and put your life cycle forecast in there. Sometimes you have products that have shorter or longer life cycles, so probably we had some kind of supply problems here. So picture we're just standing here, or perhaps here, and we saw two life cycles, and one of them was kind of truncated by supply problems, and the other one went for the full time. What do we forecast here? How do we deal with the supply problems here? Can we cut this out, these zero sales here? There were no sales, so therefore no data points here, but actually you could put in zeros. Do we take them out? Do we leave them in? And all this has to happen automatically. A problem for these life cycle products, for these seasonal products, is typically that stocks are highly imprecise. We'll talk about stocks later on. I have a couple of pictures from Aris, from your recent tech report. Looking forward to that one. Yeah, out of stocks versus seasonality in out articles. So you get all kinds of interesting things, and that's what I'm dealing with right now because some customers are unhappy with us. You wouldn't believe that people are unhappy with us, but for some strange reasons they are. So simulated data. But it just illustrates the problems that we see. If you have a problem that, if you have a product that sells like this here, and then suddenly it doesn't sell at all, and then it sells again, then that was probably an out of stock. Product probably wasn't available on the shelf. That wouldn't happen by chance. You want to detect this zero period and take it out of your history because you don't want your forecast to think that's seasonality or anything. Nobody likes that. Okay, take that out. Wonderful. Then you have other products like these here, and those are the vast majority of retail products, especially on a store level, that are highly intermittent, and you have exactly the same period of zero sales here, and of course that can happen by chance. If it's intermittent, you can just have like multiple weeks without sales. Don't take that one out. So keep this distinction in mind if you do your detection, and that's actually not very hard to do, and we've been doing that. Then you have the products like we just saw, the strawberries, that have a life cycle or a seasonal sales, and then they don't sell, and then they sell again. Question is, what do we do here? It may have been out of stock. It may have been out of stock, but reorderable. My example, and actually we're going to see some of my Nordic data later on, and one of this Nordic example was ski helmets. Yes, people buy their ski helmets at the beginning of winter when they go skiing, but they also go skiing on glaciers, as long as they still exist. So they do buy ski helmets in summer, and you can order them. They may actually also be on stock. And, but the pattern will look something like this, probably not this huge amount of sales, but it's going to have this life cycle or a seasonality around Christmas, and then later on again, and nothing in between. What do we do here? We don't want to cut these zero sales out, because then we don't have a reliable forecast of the low demand. This is actually low demand during the off-season for the ski helmets. And for other products, this represents, well, there may or may not have been demand, we just don't know, and that's a differential. This is low demand that we know. This is something where we don't know about it, and we need to distinguish the two. And picture this when you don't have 2 full years of history, but only 1 year, and then your customer expects you to do magic. Or stuff like this here. You have a product that's seasonal, and suddenly it has an out of stock in between here. So you need to detect you don't want to take this one out because that was probably bona fide low demand, but you do want to take this part out because that was probably an out of stock. Oh. Or you have something like this here. So you don't really have this life cycle, this going up, going down pattern. This is an in-out article. That's a kind of, it used to be fidget spinners, the kind of stuff where you get a container from China, you push it into the store, you sell it, and after that it's gone, and then perhaps later on you'll get something else. And notice, the start dates are not seasonal. It's not recurring at the same time of year every year. So it may recur, it may not recur, it may recur multiple times, but there's no seasonality in here. So in this case, we want to take these zeros out again, so we get a nice forecast around the expectation over here, with the meaning that, no, we don't expect this to sell every single day. We expect that when this becomes available again for reasonable amount of time, then we'll sell roughly this many. And here again, we see this interaction between the forecast and the subsequent processes, because this is really a question of what forecast do we need for the process of, for instance, distributing product from the container that just arrived in the port to our stores and DCs. And of course, products like these also have out of stocks in the middle of their sales pattern when suddenly the store goes out of stock, and then we get more product from the DC. So we need to detect and remove this one here. So it gets interestingly complicated. Now you might think that in cases like these, why am I harping on this? It's easy, just take stocks, and if it's out of stock, then it's out of stock, take the data points out. Unfortunately, and that is something my customers tell me, and that is something my product owner tells me, why don't we just use our stocks? And then I go and say, well, there's been tons of work on IRI, inventory record inaccuracy, and which is essentially, which is a code word for 60 or 70% of your system inventories are inaccurate. It's not 60 or 70% are accurate, it's 60 or 70% are inaccurate. Bachmann wants to disagree. All right, again, I'll repeat it. When I say cut periods out, do I mean using dummy variables or something else? How do I actually treat them? Actually, what we like to do is, in cases like these, where you have a stock out, we just remove the data points from the learning sample. So that's part of why we don't use ARIMA, because ARIMA then would grab into empty space, but we use a kind of regression approach, where you can, of course, just take lines out of your regression equation. Well, if you think that the time series dynamics, the autoregression moving average dynamics are strong enough to keep them in, we don't. We don't use ARIMA, we don't use autoregression, because we simply believe that these effects like these break the back of any ARIMA type model. And so we went with, other ways, and we're fine so far. There is... Yeah, exactly. I'll repeat it. So Aris just noted the problem with out of stocks that we see all over the place is that if the system thinks that we have stock on hand, like 1 or 2 or 3 units in the shelf, what's what the system says, but we actually physically don't have anything in there. Then, well, we have 0 sales, the forecast goes down, and if we think, and if we rely on the system inventories, then we see no reason not to believe these 0 sales, so we're not cutting it out if we rely on the stocks alone. And so forecast goes down, the system never replenishes because it thinks, well, forecast is low and I don't need to replenish because I have stock on hand. But it's wrong, we don't have stock on hand. And that's called silent delisting by retailers. You're delisting the product, you're not replenishing it, and it's silent because you don't know about it. You don't know that's happening. And that's actually a major problem. And things that I've heard is, well, what happens at a retailer? What kind of people work at retailers? I don't know how many of us have ever stocked a shelf. That's typically a low-wage occupation, and people doing that are often not very conscientious. So if you're coming to the shelf with your trolley full of product to restock the shelf, then you see one product, it's out of stock, it's not on the shelf anymore, you should restock it. Oh, I don't have anything on my trolley. I know I have something in the back room, but I don't want to go back and pick up the product. I'm just gonna, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna take out the tag from the shelf. I'm gonna push everything to the left and to the right across this empty, this hole in the shelf, and suddenly the hole has gone away. I don't need to do this going back and forth. It's easier for me, everybody happy, and except for the customer who doesn't get what, if they wanted to buy this particular product, and the store manager who just had a silent delisting that he doesn't know about. Because the tag has been taken out, nobody knows that the product should have been there, it's not on the shelf, it may be rotting in the back room, but you'll probably never sell it again and never replenish it again. And stuff like that happens.
On this question, from a data science modeling perspective.
Oh, wonderful, thank you. You're sitting on it.
So, follow up on this comment. From a data science perspective or a practitioner, forecasting practitioner perspective, when should you go with heuristic approaches like what you described? You know, here's a pragmatic way to bake in out of stock events into your pipeline, one way or the other, interpolation or just keep pulling them out of the training data. And when should you try to invest in actual demand uncensoring models?
Ah, wonderful. It depends, I would say. The problem always is well, we've been working with a heuristic model so far that detects stuff like this one top left here. Unfortunately, it kind of also detects stuff like this, so we're trying to make it a little bit smarter here. There is always a trade-off between getting more sophisticated models that cost more in implementation and maybe cost more in total cost of ownership in terms of more runtime. So you need more processors. More processors cost money. Nobody wants to spend any money. Perhaps they need human intervention in terms of people having to say this product is seasonal, that product is never out of stock article, so treat them differently. But any human intervention costs money in terms of people working for it, so nobody wants that. And if the actual the stock data are of good quality, then of course I'd say, of course, leverage them. We saw this here. Let's actually go there. And actually, they did have these people here. They did find one retailer who had very low amounts of IRI, inventory record inaccuracy. So perhaps they're using the SAP stock extrapolation module. I have no idea. But if our stocks are of good quality, then by all means use them. And then if you're a standard software supplier, then the question for us always is, do we need to build something that caters to the minority of people who have good stocks, or do I have to build something that deals with the vast majority of retailers who do not have bad stocks? Do not have good stocks. And then, of course, those people that do have good stocks, they come to us and say, why won't you leverage this here? So it's always a trade-off between what's expensive, what's cheap to do, what costs how much, and where's the advantage, where's the payoff if we implement something more complex. And of course, we have the chicken-egg problem. People have bad stocks because we won't leverage them. If we leverage, and we don't leverage the stocks because they're bad. So neither one wants to move first and start investing in improving the data or improving the models. So bit of a problem here too. So inventories are painful. An example that I saw some time ago, top is the sales of a product. That's one stock unit in one store. You see what kind of velocity this product has. It had exactly a single sale. And this customer actually said, well, we do have stock data, historical stock data. That's next problem. Often retailers will have the current stock, but they won't have the historical stock. And no, you cannot simply take out sales and put in deliveries. That's too easy. That way madness lies. But this retailer said, we have historical stocks. We have time-stamped stocks. So the bottom time series here, that's the time-stamped stock time series of this product whose sales we're seeing up here. And well, what we should be seeing is something like a stock at a certain level that drops down by 1 unit at this point in time, and then stays constant because we're not selling. It may go up again for deliveries or something, but what we're seeing is it starts at 1, it drops down to 0 at a completely different point in time than when the sale occurred. So for some reason they had the stock going down before the sale happened, then they had the sale, but nothing happened in the stock, and then suddenly the stock went up to 1 and down and up and down and up and down. So it doesn't have anything to do with each other. Same thing here, so a product with 2 sales, and the stock just jumps up and down. I asked them about what's happening here, and they said, oh, that is strange. And then they found out that they didn't have that so good stocks after all. Another related example is something like this here. That's a time series daily sales again. And if you look real closely, then you see that there is too little variation. You see 2 bands down here at, I think it's 8 or 10 units or something like that. And they don't vary enough. They're almost constant in some time, at some point in time. That is bakery, and that is bakery. Those are loaves of bread. And that is a bakery in a supermarket. They get their loaves prepared off-site and delivered to the bakery, and then they're baked off at the site, at the supermarket. And on typical weekdays, they get 8 or 10 loaves on one tray. They bake them off, they sell them, and at the end of the day, they're sold out. And so you get something like this here. And on Saturday, perhaps on Friday, they get lots more because people will buy more. So that's when you get these patterns up here, higher sales, and you still see far too many sales points of exactly the same height. So they probably ran out of stock in 80% of days. How did I find a time series like this? Well, I need to do marketing too. We all need to do marketing. Everybody has to do marketing. So I was told to find some time series where we do a good job forecasting. So I went through my database and I selected on error measures and found a couple of time series that looked like this here. And I said, look, a wonderful forecast here. It doesn't show the forecast, but it was a wonderful forecast. And then I looked twice and I said, well, wait a minute, something's wrong here. Of course, it's very easy to forecast if on every weekday you sell exactly 8 or 10 units because you're censored there, because it just forecasts, well, you're going to sell 8 or 10 units. A very good forecast. Unfortunately, it's a sales forecast, not a demand forecast, not what they actually wanted to. I didn't end up using this time series because I was afraid people would notice what's happening here. The dimensions of the challenge. Len, you have time? You notice time? I don't, because all the clocks on the wall are more or less confusing. All right, you stop me. The dimensions of the challenge. So, why did I put this in here? No matter, this is nice enough. So, forecasting for replenishment versus for allocation planning. So what's the subsequent processes that use forecasts? If you have a time series like this here, simulated data, sales up here, and then we have little green lines down here. Those are the life cycle, when the product is supposed to be sold. So this is probably some kind of in-out article or a seasonal article or whatever. Think of Christmas tree decorations, whatever it is. Those are probably not this particular product because I simulated that somewhere in fall, whatever. So these are historical data, and then we have a forecast, and we know when it's going to be sold, so we need a forecast for this time period here, and I just did something simple, and the ideal forecast is a flat line. Let's assume that our customer is sophisticated enough to be able to live with flat line forecasts, which is not a given. All right, so if we have two people here, we have a replenishment planner and an allocation promotion planner, two people working at the same retailer. Okay, what does the replenishment planner see if she's faced with this kind of forecast? She's happy because, well, what happened here? We just said over here, well, the time series is, the life cycle is a little longer, so we actually put in zeros down here. We don't have any sales there. And she says, well, this is exactly, well, it's a little bit slow, but we'll logistically round, so we'll put in a little more, no problem there. But this is actually roughly the average sales over this life cycle here. And as always, we'll just stop replenishment at some point in time, even if we could still replenishment. So as always, so she's happy. It's a good forecast for her. She knows that every single data point up here probably reflects demand on that day, and she's glad, she's happy. Our allocation planner, who's actually in this process a little earlier, she needs to figure out how much product do I need to get from China or to allocate to the store entirely. So what she's looking at is not the forecast per day over here. She's looking at historical total sales over this entire life cycle and the total forecast over the entire life cycle. And what she sees, she probably doesn't even see these time series. She sees that we sold 285 here, 303 over here, and now the total forecast here is 436. So 50% too much. And she'll come to the forecasters and say, what are you thinking of? This is far too much. I can't buy 436 units for this store, because if I do that for 1,000 stores, I'll be left over with 50% too much stock at the end of the day. So a forecast that is fine point-wise, every single data point is probably fine, and the replenishment planner is happy, will be badly off once you look at the aggregate that we have here. So actually the forecasting happens along multiple dimensions. And so we have the time dimension, and we just saw that. One person looks at every single day, the other person looks at the cumulative forecast over a life cycle. So we have the time, we have a product dimension, stock keeping units, and so on and so forth. We also have the supply dimension. What levels do we have here? Along the time dimensions, we have hours, days, weeks, and all of these could be interesting up to years. Life cycles for a product could be hours for freshly baked stuff at the deli. You can only keep that warm so long, for 2 hours, whatever. You have a product like a new iPhone whose life cycle is months and years. You can have promotions that can run for days or weeks or months, and you may need a total promotion forecast for the entire promotion amount. So you need an aggregate forecast over that period. Along the product dimension, you have stock keeping units and products above them, and we saw the difference with the fashion products, styles and sizes. Then you have the brands and categories and the total, and along the supply chain dimension, stay with here, we have bundles and bills of materials where we need perhaps aggregate forecasts. If you forecast for car parts, then typically your car will have 4 wheels. So you probably need to keep that in mind in some way. And logistics will also happen along these along these product dimensions because you often have bundles that are sent out. If you replenish yogurts, you get these trays with 30 different yogurts in different flavors, and they always get replenished in a mixed tray. Along the supply chain dimension, you have stores, you have formats where you have, like the convenience stores may have different logistics than the standard supermarkets. You have distribution centers, you have the chain, you have the industry, and then you have all kinds of things that happen in regions because perhaps you have a regional distribution center that delivers to the convenience stores and to the others. You have countries and so forth. So what kind of forecasts need what kind of granularities? If you're looking at store replenishment, you want to look at stock keeping unit times day times store, or at times multiple days times store. If you want to look at DC replenishment, you typically replenish into the DC more rarely, like once a week or once every couple of weeks. So you need other aggregations. Promotion planning, no promotion planner cares about when you're going to sell something. They care about the total sales across the promotion when they plan a promotion. So they don't care about the daily forecast, they care about the total forecast across the promotional period. If you want to plan markdowns, and you mark down everything everywhere, perhaps, or only in single stores, you need a forecast for SKUs and remaining life cycle, or hours or days, and or location. Question? Oh. Yeah. So a question was, how do I communicate forecast accuracy to our customers, especially in the context of slow movers or intermittent demands? Honestly, I'd rather take that offline, or perhaps at the end if we have time, because that's really orthogonal to this here. I have an entire talk about forecast accuracy measurement that I can inflict on you. Can we take that offline, perhaps? Sorry. Perhaps we'll have time at the end, but I'm always already been. Assortment planner. So, yeah.
Agree with most of this. I'm surprised that you separate store replenishment and DC replenishment, because if your items are forecastable, then I would tell a retailer to go to a pure pull model where the DC replenishment is an optimization off of the individual store forecast, not its own separate forecast.
Well, you heard about it, you heard the question. The difference in the DC is, a pull model where you just take aggregated store demands and forecast that and use that as forecast for the DC, if I understand it correctly. Lead times and everything. Yeah, the problem is if you're into an omni-channel situation, actually I should have put in a fourth dimension for the omni-channel situation here, but it's just kind of hard to visualize. I'm not going to inflict that on you. If you're in omni-channel, then your DC might be delivering to stores. It might also be delivering to end customers, and that might make up a large amount of what goes out of the DC. You might not be delivering to the same customers every day, because if a customer orders something and one DC is tapped out, or its product is already promised to stores, you have to deliver from a different DC. So you have to deal with that. And at some point in time, it really becomes a question of we need a forecast of DC demand. How can we leverage store forecasts or store demands? How can we leverage forecasts of consumer demand? And it turns into a magic soup, really, where you have to put in the different ingredients so that a nice forecast comes out. We think that forecasting at the DC makes most sense, and where we can also include the drivers at the DC. So promotions being driven with a lag or a lead time, essentially. And we also add in the forecasts for demand from the stores. And actually, we're not putting in the forecasted store demands, the demands that the stores face, but we're forecasting what the store will order in the future. So what we're doing is we're forecasting demand at the store, and we're calculating the orders at every point in time in the future. So we're having an order forecast, we call that. And that's one ingredient that we'll put into our magic soup for the distribution center forecast. Does that help?
Yes, but it begs a second question. If chances are you're using hierarchical forecasting in such a process, why don't you, and your stores are probably mapped to DCs in your location hierarchy, why don't you just pull the location level forecast?
We do pull it as one ingredient in the DC forecast. It's just only one ingredient. Because stuff that can happen is stores getting reassigned, having end customer demand to the DC or to stores or whatever. So it's just, it's just slightly more complicated going on here. Some of our customers actually want forecasts in the DC for the demand that a particular store has to that DC. It gets complicated. Let's continue. All right, so allocation management uses other aggregations, workforce management, supply negotiations. I'll go a little quicker here. The dimensions of this problem is just, thank you, it's just humongous. You have tens, hundreds of thousands of SKUs, thousands of stores. Once you have the different aggregation levels in here, it all has to happen quickly. It has to be extremely robust, because if one of your 100 million forecasts is badly wrong, that's the one that you will see, and people will not forgive you. So very often I'll think about changing something in our algorithms, and perhaps it improves the forecast on average, but if it makes the bad forecasts worse, then it's a no-go. That's a deal breaker, because the bad forecasts are the ones that we get, and those are the ones that erode the trust in the system. So it's really always a question of not only looking at average forecast accuracy, but also looking at the tail, at the long right tail of the bad forecast. And we're back to forecast accuracy measurement. Let's talk later on. All right, catastrophes. Earthquakes. This was an earthquake that happened in New Zealand 10 years ago. What happened was that the water mains burst, and people didn't have any running water. So they had to go to the stores and buy bottled water there. Supply chains worked. I mean, you wouldn't expect something like this to be feasible from the normal demand, but they did send in tons of water. The question just is, how do we deal with stuff like that? And you essentially have to cut out everything that is not representative, because you see, as the water mains were repaired and then there came another earthquake, the demand for bottled water went down, and then it probably is going to stay down here again. Question is, how do we need to probably cut this out or put in a predictor in case earthquakes recur, stuff like that. We probably also had an earthquake down here. Pandemics, toilet paper. That's my supermarket in Germany. That's a picture I took in December 2020, and that's the toilet paper shelves. And you see very little forecasting to be done here, right? And you need to deal with that. First, we had the period where everybody bought their toilet paper, mainly driven by social media. That was not representative. Then we had the period where nobody bought toilet paper because there was nothing left. So we have to deal with that and take that one out. And there were multiple waves of panic buying. It was just fun times, fun times. The question is, especially with pandemics, with COVID, what happens after? What happens now? In Germany, the airlines are completely overwhelmed by people getting back to normal, and back to a pre-pandemic normal. But the question really is, what is pre- and post-pandemic normal? This is something, that was a situation that we were faced with like a year ago, something, what happens now? Is this the new normal? Do we stay down here? That was washing powder, detergent. Suddenly people, probably they spent all day in their pajamas and never washed them. So washing powder demand went down. Or perhaps it's rather a case of people switching their demand from one store to another, because they tried, at least at the beginning of the pandemic, they tried to bundle their purchases at one store and not visit 5 or 6 different stores, because it reduced their contagion risk that way. So what happens here? Or perhaps we have something that goes up during the pandemic. That was cat litter boxes. You see fun things in our job. people bought their cat litter boxes, and then we expected forecasts to go back to pre-pandemic normals because all the cats should have a new litter box at some point in time. Wars. Then we had the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and that in Germany led to shortages in cooking oil and flour. And I honestly don't know how much of that was driven by real supply chain issues and flour and oil not coming out of Ukraine, and how much of that was driven by social media, which is why I put social media among the catastrophes here. I'm actually going to skip the M5, as I said, talk to me afterwards, and I'm going to show you a little horror show of examples until somebody cuts me off. These are time series in 6 different stores of a brand of a SKU of breakfast coffee, again, daily sales. What we see here is things like, look, one store started selling only a long time later than everything else. And everything else looks very different. We see this time series here, it wiggles around down here, and then suddenly on one day we sell 1,500, 2,000 units, whatever it is, and we go down again. So we might think that some of these are promotions, promotional spikes, but actually I don't even know whether we have promotional data in here, but what we would expect would be to have promotions on all stores at the same point in time, because retailers don't run promotions on single stores. But this spike here, you see it again down here, it could be the same point in time, but we don't see anything up here. What's happening? We don't know. We also see a green line underneath here, and that's going to be more important later on. The green line, that's the listing period. That's a period when the product can be ordered by the store from the DC. And then we have red lines when the product cannot be ordered by the store from the DC. Apparently that doesn't stop people from buying the product. So either the store still had humongous amount of stock left that they sold off while they couldn't replenish, or the listing information is crap. I'm not going to tell you what my impression is of this here. Down here we have another store where we have, again, peaks that look like promotions. That's the way a promotion should look like. It takes like 2 weeks and we have higher sales during the promotion, but we don't see that repeated up here. We don't see it anywhere. So very strange data. And I have tons of this. This is chicken. And what we see here is very regular demand down here, probably a lot of censoring going on. Then huge peaks of chicken sales. Again, I don't know who buys so much chicken. And up here, there's a ton of censoring going on. You see that they never sell more than like 12 units, 12 or 13 units. So they just buy 12 chickens. And if you want a chicken from that store, better come early. And again, we have this period here where there was nothing. But apparently that was not a problem with the DC, because they're all, as far as I know, supplied by the same DC, and the other stores did have product. So it was not like there was no chicken at the DC. Probably somebody stopped reordering or something. Yeah. 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 Very good question. I'm going to repeat it. Whether these stores could also supply restaurants or canteens or cafeterias or stuff. That can happen. I don't know whether it can happen here, but for other stores, yes, I've seen that. Once I walked through one of my supermarkets and some guy was pulling out like a whole trolley with a ton of flour. It was literally 1,000 packages of flour. They're pulling that across a cash register, and I was just hoping that they'd mark this as a special sale so it doesn't go into the regular sales. So all kinds of fun things can happen here. Chocolate cake, very strange. It sells sometimes, and then suddenly it doesn't sell at all, so probably had an out of stock here. And this store, apparently, I don't know who lives here, but it's somebody who doesn't. Lots of people who don't like chocolate cake, apparently. And everywhere else, you sell one every day or multiple units every day, and here you sell at most one. And sometimes you don't even have listing information. Here, the listing information only starts here. Before that, we don't know whether it was listed. So again, as with the stocks, sometimes the data are reliable and sometimes not. Minced meat, I'm not going to inflict all of these on you. Sometimes it can be ordered, sometimes not. Sometimes the listing information is differential between stores. You would expect all stores to either be able to order a product or not to be able to order a product. Here it's some stores can order it, some others can't. We don't know. And then my product owner tells me to leverage this listing information. We have the listing information in a table, make use of it. And I show him these examples and I say, I don't know whether that's good enough for us to make anything. Forest fruit yogurt, that's an in-out article, really. You sell tons of it, sometimes, and then sometimes nothing, and then sometimes a little bit. I would be fine with not selling anything when it's not on sale and on promotion and in the store, but selling like 1 or 2 units down here once in a while, and then hundreds at other points, it doesn't really make sense. Either you have it in the shelf or you don't. So I don't know what's in the data here. Skis, as I said, this is Nordics. I also had the ski helmets here, I'm not showing that, but you sold the skis here. And again, this is a question of how do we deal with these non-sales down here. That's probably really low demand during the off-season. So we should not be forecasting out like the average in-period sales during summer. People don't like that. You should really be forecasting something like 0 down here. Almonds, a 40-pound bag. I'm having problems picturing a 40-pound bag of almonds and people buying 50 of those. Probably that was stores or cafeterias or something. Barbecue salad. This store sold exactly 1 unit at a period when it was not even able to replenish. So all kinds of fun things here. Shower gel, potted greens, conclusions. Let's talk about the conclusions. So I have conclusions for everybody in here, so everybody can disagree with me on some points. For researchers, actually, I've seen so many papers on optimizing accuracy for retail forecasts. That's fine, that's good. It's just that seeing all these problems in actual real data, the problems I'm dealing with, it's not teasing out the last percentage point of MAPE out of my forecasts. It's getting this crap data to tell me anything. So I don't know how useful it is to wrangle with the data, with the M5 data for the next 10 years. So predictions, there's this IRI data set that has predictors feature and display. And everybody's been using it because it's available. Unfortunately, it's too simplistic because there are so many more predictive markers and promotional markers than feature and display. Open challenges, how do we account for these recent supply chain disruptions, what we've been seeing and what we're still seeing? How do we deal with the omnichannel data? I haven't gone into that because we all want to get to our coffee. How do we automatically clean data? I see no way how a researcher could give an answer to this automatically cleaning data. Let me go on, and then for practitioners, please, please, please try to clean your data. So correct your data, model your causals, model your promotions, distinguish different promotion types, and perhaps you need to aggregate some different promotion types at some point in time, but at least keep them in your system. Understand historical product availability, stocks versus listing. The listing information that I just showed you, it's not really useful. Special customer orders, we just talked about those, restaurants and so on. Which forecasts are relevant? Remember the promotion planner versus the replenishment planner. They need different forecasts. They're asking different questions to the forecast. So you need to figure out what kind of forecasts do you actually need for your subsequent processes. Don't just tell the forecaster, give me a forecast. Work with him and discuss with him what do you use the forecast for. I know that people are disagreeing with me on that. We had the discussion yesterday, but that's, I'm having the mic here right now. And for all, I think that explainability and modifiability of models and forecasts is key. People have been denouncing me for not liking deep learning. And yeah, of course, you're right, Tim. The problem always is I get a forecast from a customer. A customer tells me this forecast is crap, and I can tell you exactly why it is crap. Why is it crap? And then I look at it, and with our regression-based forecasts, I can isolate the problem, I can deal with the problem. I would have a hard time with a deep learning network or any other black box model explaining why the forecast is crap. Yes, you can do explainable AI. You can say this is crap because of that predictor, but then the customer comes back and says, okay, how do we improve it? And that's where the deep learning aspects get a little harder. So I think that this modifiability, where you see that forecasts are systematically wrong in some way, how do we retrain them? How do we improve the models for this particular instance situation without making everything else worse? And that's, I think, something key for the for the practitioners. Thank you. I think we have the mic right here. Perhaps you can pass it around. Tim.
So the causal point definitely resonates, and I think it's a good idea maybe in your scenario not to use auto-regression simply maybe because there's no causality between yesterday and today for tomatoes. Maybe there is, but it's weak. But I was wondering if you have any thoughts on complicated causal structures where, let's say, a promotion interacts with a campaign, or there's colliders and all these things in causality. Do you work with this at the moment already? Do you plan to use it? Do you think it's a second order problem?
I think that is a second order problem. What we're, so first off on autoregressive behavior, well, there is probably some kind of, well, tomorrow's sale on tomatoes have something to do with today's sales of tomatoes. So if you have today's sales of tomatoes, you have a better notion of what you're going to sell tomorrow. The question just is how much of that is simple seasonality and captured by seasonality. So that's part of why we're not using autoregression, because we believe that these predictors already capture much of that. On the more complicated interactions between promotions and stuff, well, that is in some degree very important. For instance, we had one of our customers had a promotion on olive oil right at the beginning of the COVID lockdowns. You can imagine what happened. People were kind of storming the store and stocking up on olive oil like there was no tomorrow. I was in Switzerland where olive oil is horrendously expensive. And so it was a price reduction, a strong price reduction, 50%, which already usually had a huge impact. And in this case, with the COVID restriction coming in and nobody ever knowing whether they would ever be allowed to leave the house again, it was, I think it was like civil war in the stores. And so the question really is, how do we deal with a promotion like this for the next promotion that's coming up? What's going to happen then? Is it still in lockdown? Are people still panicked? Or are they living among like bottles of olive oil that I haven't gotten rid of yet? So it was a huge uncertainty about subsequent promotions. And it's these kind of interactions that make our life so hard. And what we also see is interactions between promotions and day of week. Your promotion will have a differential impact on Wednesday than on Saturday. If your promotion runs for 2 or 3 weeks, then it's going to have a differential impact in the first week than in the second week. So you have to model, in statistical parlance, you have to model the interaction between the promotion and day of week, time into promotion, seasonality. If you have a promotion on barbecue meat, you have to model the interaction between promotions and weather. And so it can get as complicated as you like and even more. And at some point in time, you're polishing your asymptotes and you should stop doing something.
So we have to officially end this session. Feel free to come up and we have to officially end this session. Feel free to come up and continue discussion with Stephan.
I just announce you'll have another opportunity to have a go at Stephan at the panel on retailing for Wednesday.
And anyways, we'll have tons of retail sessions that Robert very enthusiastically put together. We're going to start in half an hour in room 9. I'll be chairing. So be there and learn all about retail forecasting.
Thank you, Stephan.
Thank you all.